Okay. Hi, Nangamso. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Okay, so I'm Nangamso, originally from the Eastern Cape, studied in Cape Town at UCT. I did a Bachelor of Business Science in Analytics, and I'm currently working as a quantitative analyst for a bank.
Okay, nice. So can you maybe take us through your degree? Like, how long is it? And what kind of marks was the bank looking for? Like, not necessarily specifics, but like, what kind of ranges were they looking for?
Okay, so the degree is a Bachelor of Business Science in Analytics. So the main major is statistical sciences. And I mean, so if you do a business science at UCT, it's usually a 4-year degree.
Mm-hmm.
And that usually covers, so you do a lot of, my degree specifically focused on statistical sciences and a bit of computer science. So you do about 2 to 3 years of computer science courses. You do a bit of economics, you do a bit of accounting, and some law courses as well. So it's a very well-rounded degree. And in terms of marks, I mean, obviously you need to be doing relatively well. But I think in a lot of cases, when it comes to recruiting, recruiters usually look at your marks. They look at a balance of your marks and your ability to present yourself as a valuable asset and someone who will be able to add value.
So when you say like your marks have to be like fairly good, like is someone who's getting around the 60s, like what would they have, or 50s, like what would they have to do in order to like necessarily prove themselves, or is that even a qualifying criteria?
So, I mean, definitely marks do matter, but I think what general employers will look for is a balance of marks and your general overall build as a person. So you need to show that you've been involved in other things besides academics in your university life. So I mean, there's no criteria of if you're getting 50s, you're not going to get employed. No, it's a matter of just being a well-rounded person and showing a relative amount of technical ability and problem solving skills. And yeah, so it's not like there's no deep emphasis on marks, but obviously you need to have relatively good marks. So I think if you're getting around 60s, if your average is around 60s, then you should find yourself in a good place. Yeah.
Makes sense. Can you maybe give us some of the activities that you were doing just to give people an idea of the things that they can sort of do?
So in my time in universities, I did quite a bit. So initially I got quite involved in my residence life. So I worked as a receptionist, which obviously requires certain skills, communication skills, always being presentable. And I also worked as a sub warden, which also has its own pros as well. And got involved in a few societies. So I was part of APSIP. I was part of the Black Leadership Forum. I was also part of a student consulting organization where we sort of went to businesses in the poor areas around Cape Town and helped them with business solutions. So it's kind of a lot of activities across the university life.
And in terms of applying, what can you take us through that process? What that looked like for you? When did you start applying? Yeah.
Yeah, so I was very paranoid about being unemployed. So like as soon as I started final year, I started looking around, looking when applications open, where my skills would be needed, so the different industries that my skills would be needed. And so I kind of jotted down all the dates where applications open. And I think by March already I had started applying, I'd started doing interviews as well. And I think what you'll find also is that when you're in final year, I mean, most universities, you'll have organizations coming to universities, expressing their interest in people with certain skills. So we also had like a few organizations coming into our classes and uh, telling us what they require and the skills that they require. And if you find yourself to fit those sort of those descriptions, then yeah, then I would end up applying for those. So for me personally, by March, April, I had already started applying. I think by June, July, I had already had my first like offers, job offers. So I think the best thing to do is always just start early, apply as early as possible. Because some organizations will start taking people as soon as applications come in, and some will wait for applications to close first. So now if you start late, then they've already taken a few people and competition is very tight and there's less positions available. So the best thing is always to start as early as possible.
Makes sense. Overachiever. So in terms of like what you can do with your degree, you know, say someone doesn't want to work at a bank, like what other
Yeah.
places can you apply?
So this is yeah. So for example, so people with my degree, so I did statistical sciences, but I fall in a category of quantitative degrees. So that will include physics, that will include maths, that will include actuarial science, that will include applied maths. So those kind of degrees kind of show a certain indication about the type of person that you are and your abilities and your skills. So for me personally, the kind of jobs that I applied for, so I applied for a lot of consulting roles, I applied for quantitative analyst roles. I don't necessarily know a wide range of jobs, but I mean, it's just a matter of doing your research and finding where you fit in. So for me personally, it was mostly, my focus was mainly around consulting and working around the bank.
It makes sense. And then what does your day-to-day look like as a quantitative analyst? Why am I saying woo? Okay. Yes.
So on the day-to-day, I mean, so with a quantitative analyst is someone who basically works, in the banking perspective, you work with a lot of data. So it's a matter of just finding a bridge between the data that we have access to and business decisions. And I mean, if I were to describe the role of a quantitative analyst is to use the data that we have access to drive decision making. So on a day-to-day, it's a matter of constantly being in communication with stakeholders and understanding what business requirements are and using the data that we have to kind of drive the strategies that the bank has.
Okay, makes sense. And when you entered the bank, did you go through a graduate program or was it like immediately a position? And if it was a graduate program, what does it look like? Are there rotations, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so I went through a graduate program. So it was a 1-year graduate program. And then after that, you become permanent. And it's not rotational. So the interview process, the way the recruitment process works with the organization I work for is that you initially go through the initial process where you have your interviews with HR, and then you get a bit of exposure to the bank and the different departments that you could potentially work for, and then you have an opportunity to select 3 that most interest or are most appealing to you, and then your CV will be passed on to those business units, and then you'll have interviews with the technical quantitative analyst, and if they like you, they take you on. So it's a matter of you find the environment that you fit in best, and they interview you, and if you fit the culture and what they're looking for, then they take you on. Then you spend a year. So the graduate program is a balance between learning your technical skills and your more soft skills. So the bank usually takes us through a lot of training on the soft skills, and the technical stuff you learn a lot in your day-to-day work, but the soft skills you go through a lot of training throughout the year. So I think, yeah, like from the very beginning to about November, December, there's constant training on soft skills. So that's kind of a balance of the graduate program.
That's good. And because I think soft skills are like the ones where people don't train as much and they're very needed in the workplace. And then my next question to
Absolutely,
you.
because I mean,
Sorry, yeah?
you know, I was saying, like, when you're working, you're not sitting behind a computer the whole day. You're working in a team environment. You're working with stakeholders. You constantly have to manage relationships. So the soft skills are very important, even if you are mostly in a technical role.
That's true. And then in terms of the interview, can you take me through that interview process, what that looked like, and maybe some of the questions that you were asked in the interview and how you prepared for the interview going in?
Yeah, I think so. What's important, so the initial stages of the interview process, first you'll have your interview with the HR, and that's more to get to know you as a person, what your likes are, what your interests are. And then further on down the line, you start having the more technical interviews to kind of see your logical reasoning and your understanding of the job that you're applying for. So, I mean, the initial stages, obviously, is like your getting to know you as a person. And then the technical stuff, I mean, I think the most important thing is to know what you're applying for, to know how you fit into that environment, and what would be expected of you. So it's important to do a lot of research. And yeah, so I think, can you just repeat your whole question so that I can touch on whatever I haven't touched on?
So it's three parts. It's when it's the interview process. So you said it was the HR interview. So what did that look like? Were there other follow-up interviews, etc.? And then the second part is like how you prepared for the interview. And then the last part is like what kind of questions were you asked in the interview?
Okay, so how did I prepare for the interview? I mean, I did a lot of research and to kind of get an idea of the type of questions to expect and the type of answers that are expected of you. So that's very important. And
Sorry, when
because
you
I mean,
say
you could,
research, please elaborate. Like what
yeah.
kind
So
of research?
yeah. So I did. Google is your best friend when you're doing research. Yeah. So I went on Google, Googled a lot of, yeah, found out what is expected, and watched quite a few YouTube videos as well, like sort of mock interviews. And also myself, I went to, so in my alma mater, they have like a career service where you're able to go for mock interviews and you get feedback on how you did on the interviews. So that played quite a role as well. And I think the more interviews you go for, the more comfortable you become and the more you kind of know what to expect and you know what the people interviewing you expect of you as well. So that helped a lot as well because I started very early and I went through a lot of interviews. So by the time I was doing like the tougher interviews, I had already like prepared myself. I knew what to sort of expect. So that helped quite a bit as well. And the type of questions. So I mean, so you find that they'll ask you what you ask you about yourself, and then the more technical stuff you get asked. For example, given that I'm working in a bank and I'm working in the credit space, so they'll ask you what my understanding of a scorecard is. How does a bank do credit? What should the bank consider in order to like reach a decision where they feel like you are worthy to be given credit, and what are the challenges that a bank might face when they have given out credit and all those things. Yeah, so it's a mixture of both soft and relatively technical questions, and sometimes you'll get asked questions like so I think when you're in a relatively technical role, I mean, you need to be a logical thinker. So you get asked questions like, how many golf balls are flying around in Joburg at this very moment in time? And I think usually with those type of questions, it's no one is expecting you to give a correct answer. I think the most important thing is just the logical steps you take in reaching whatever whatever answer you get to.
I definitely failed at that interview. But I hear you. And then, in terms of the culture of the bank, and the
Yeah.
hours that you work. Can you elaborate on that for someone who's looking to get into that space?
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of culture, I think I've been extremely lucky to join an employer that's very focused on growing their staff, and I think the one aspect that they really push is an owner manager culture. You're very trusted. Like, I went in, and within 2 months, I had a manager that trusted me. I was expected to do things by myself. I was expected to handle my relationships with stakeholders by myself. And you have people to help you at all times. Like, you have, whenever you need help, people will help you. But you are also very much motivated to kind of own your work. If you see inefficiencies, even if you've been there for a month or 2 months, if you see inefficiencies, you're trusted to kind of do what you feel is best to kind of make things better. So there's a lot, yeah. So they drive that a lot. Owner manager culture. You own your work. You can do the changes that are necessary. You've got people to help you at all times. Like, I think for me, that's one of the things. I mean, when you go in there, you always have the mentality of you don't want to bother people. People are busy, but like when you ask, people are always willing to help, and that for me has helped a lot in my growth.
And the hours?
Oh, hours. I mean, hours are they very, what's the word? Okay, the word isn't coming to me now, but it's very, you open to do as you sort of please, in the sense that you obviously, there's an expectation that you deliver on your work, but there's no starting time that everyone needs to start work at 8 o'clock, or everyone needs to start work at 9 o'clock. You kind of decide what hours best suit you, but there's an expectation that you need to deliver on your work. So if you feel like, if you're a morning person, you can start work at 6 o'clock, and by 3 o'clock you're done for the day. If you're more of an afternoon person, you can start work at 11. I mean, there's people who walk into the office at 11 or 12 o'clock and work until the evening, and that's fine. So for me personally, I'm very much of a morning person. I don't like to be in the office in the evening. So if I know I've got a lot of work, 6 o'clock, I'm already sitting at my desk, and I make sure I finish whatever I need to finish, and I'm out. So it's mostly up to you. You don't have a manager that's going to tell you, listen, you need to be in by 8 o'clock, as long as you kind of manage your expectations with your stakeholders as well. Because obviously, if you're an 11 o'clock person, then there's going to be times where there are going to be meetings that are set up for 8 o'clock, and you have to obviously pitch there. But there's no strict rules on you need to start at this time and you need to finish at this time.
Makes a lot of sense. And in terms of career trajectory, what does that look like?
I mean, performance is very much rewarded. So if you go in and you prove your abilities and you prove that you can deliver on your work and you're making major changes, then you will definitely get rewarded for that. So that's very open. There's no matter of age. I mean, we've got CEOs. So the way the organization is structured is that each business unit is kind of treated as a business in itself. So each business unit will have their own CEO. I mean, in the bank, we've got CEOs that are 29 years old, and that's very impressive. So it's not a matter of age or how long you've been working for. If you prove your abilities and you prove that you can deliver on work, then you'll definitely get rewarded.
That sounds amazing. And then any just like tips you would give anyone who does want to enter the space in terms of maybe how they should conduct themselves throughout the interview, or just CV, any tips that you have?
Yeah, I think in these types of instances, Google is always your friend. Do your research. Make sure, because it's very hard to go into an interview, or it's very hard for an employer to employ someone who's not sure what they want, who hasn't done their research. So do your research. Know what you want. Know how you fit into the environment you're applying for. Know what would be expected of you. Know how your skills and what you'll be able to offer will fit into the holistic environment, and do your research about the organization that you're applying to as well. So it's important. Like, people get really impressed when you kind of show that you've done research and you actually have knowledge of the culture and the organization looks like and what is expected of you. So that's very important. Research, and even more research.
Yeah, that's true. And I think it also shows like the kind of person that you be even when you're working, because you will be
Absolutely.
prepared for meetings and, you know, go the extra mile and things like that. So yeah, I
Exactly.
agree with you fully there. Yeah.
And organizations like curious people, people who want to learn, people who show interest at all times.
That's very true. Well, thank you for this chat. I'm sure it's going to help a lot of people who are looking for employment currently at this time. Yeah, and yeah, thanks for the chat, like I said. And then I guess my last question would be, where do you see yourself, you know, going in the next 5 years or so?
Yeah. I mean, firstly, thank you again for having me. I think this is a great platform. It's always important to put information out there because we are on the other side now. So it's important to kind of pass on the knowledge to those that are still coming. And on where I see myself in 5 years, I mean, I think for me personally, I think 5 years is a very long time. So I'm not someone who usually plans that far ahead. I usually just look on a 2 to 3 year interval because I don't like to restrict myself to a very rigid timeline. So I usually stick to like 2 to 3 years. And I mean, I'm still young. I've been working for a year and a half now, and I'm still looking to learn. There's still a lot to learn. So I think the next 2 to 3 years, it's just a matter of learning, gaining as much information, and sort of adding as much value to the organization as I can. So yeah, that's me for the next 2 to 3 years. Learn as much as possible, add value, make changes where needed.
That's great. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop the recording here.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.